Welcome to Lectionary Call-In for Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. We're two laypersons, a pastor and an academician, gathered for about 55 minutes each week to discuss the Gospel Lectionary for the coming Sunday. And this Sunday is January 25th. And each Tuesday we call in from wherever we may be at 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And for our friend Charles Willard in Minnesota, that's 5:30 a.m. Our little team is working to be faithful to Lectionary Year B. We hope the discussion will provide areas of focus and reflection. Here's how it works. We develop perspectives independently after the leadoff person shares some questions for the week, and then we share, encourage, and challenge each other. And here are the folks joining us in today's discussion.
Bill Hall.
Sarah Mickelson.
Charles Willard.
And I'm Don Upton. And I'll read the passage for this Sunday. It's Mark 1:14 through 20, and I'll be reading from the New Revised Standard Version. Now, after John was arrested, Jesus came to Galilee, proclaiming the good news of God and saying, "The time is fulfilled, and the kingdom of God has come near. Repent and believe in the good news." As Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the sea. They were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. And he went a little further, and he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, who were in their boat mending the nets. Immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and followed him. And that's the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Well, before we get into the questions for this day, let's go to our friend Charles Willard to see if he has any opening observations. Hello, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm fine, even though it's early in the morning here in Minnesota, where it's also cold and there's snow on the ground. My reason for commenting and breaking in at this point is I wanted to say that this particular passage is a good opportunity to think about the way that the three so-called synoptic gospels are related to each other and how they work. It's a good illustration of that. The theory, which is widely accepted, I think would be reasonable to say, the theory is that the Gospel of Mark was the first written of the three synoptic gospels. They're called synoptic gospels because they relate to each other much more intimately and collectively than the Gospel of John, which, in effect, John strides on his own, independently of these other three Gospels. But these three Gospels do relate to each other, and they relate to each other in a particular way. As best scholars can presently see it and understand it and make sense of it, that's not quite the right word, making sense of it, come to understand how they are related to each other. The consensus is that the Gospel of Mark was the first of the three written, and that the other two synoptic Gospels, Matthew and Luke, used a version of what we have now as the Gospel of Mark, and added to that parts from another unknown document called the Writings, and this particular reason I'm pointing that out now is this is a good opportunity to, if you take a look at it, if you have, as I've done, lined up the gospel readings from Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you can then see how each of them has started out with the Gospel of Mark and then added things to it. Matthew, for example, has added a whole section right at the very beginning where he goes off to he left Nazareth and he made his home in Capernaum by the sea. And you wonder why that's there, and he follows up by saying, so that what had been spoken through the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled. And it then goes on to describe what it is, so that Matthew has used added that piece in there, a sort of a departure from it, which is not part of the Gospel of Mark, to link the Old Testament prophecy, which needed to be fulfilled and was fulfilled. I don't have a better, a useful explanation, except that in Luke, uses the same thing, talks about the same thing, come to the same conclusions. The same people are called in the same order, that sort of thing. Luke has a long section about Jesus walking along the shore of Galilee, and then and then seeing Peter and Simon Peter out in the boat, and he has this long conversation with Simon Peter about casting his nets out, and then how they were all amazed by that. And so it's just a good opportunity to see how these three Gospels use each other, or at least in the case of Matthew and Luke, use Mark and then add to it in ways that support their particular needs and developments for writing the Gospels the way they did. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Well, let's jump into the questions for this morning. And for those listening in, if you're facilitating your class, teaching a group, Zooming in with friends, we offer these up as maybe some areas that you could use to as a catalyst for conversation as well. So the first one, Bill, is coming at you first. The ministry begins here very clearly when John is arrested. And the lead passage per the author of Mark is the time is fulfilled. That's the lead message here, at least as I read it. The time is fulfilled. And there's a curious dynamic of completion and urgency, the arrival and the need for more action. Like, time is here, it's fulfilled, and more things are happening. And the ministry's pointed into the present and into the lifespans of those people who are present while involving the history of the Creator, the fulfillment. And this time around with this popular passage, I'm just curious, since it's about complete, and there's more to do with your life, I'm curious about your thoughts today about Kairos and Chronos in this passage. Has your view of this dynamic of the completion of the work, the fulfillment of God's promise, and the ongoing lives that we're leading, has that changed over time? Bill, could you start this, please?
Thank you. Good morning, team members and those listening in later. We noted this before we started recording. Your questions this week, Don, have really stirred a lot of reflection on my part. First of all, I would note that Jesus repeats the message of John the Baptist, which is repent. It is noted by Mark Davis and anyone who studies the original Greek that, interestingly, that word repent is in, to use some somewhat technical language, the present imperfect second person plural, meaning it is describing something that begins in the here and now, but it is not complete. It continues on into the future. And second person plural would mean, in the words of us from the South, y'all. It means corporately and individually, this is an action that begins and continues. Now, I'll just note it and move on, but the fact that there's a continuity, Don, between what John the Baptist was saying and Jesus, I think gets somewhat at your question about the past and the present, completed and not yet completed. I appreciate those, that you pick up on those dynamics, which I think are at work here and were at work in the ministry of Jesus. You know, Jesus said, I didn't come to do away with the law, I came to fulfill it. So that being grounded in the past, but grounded in the past so that in the present we can act on what we hear and come to understand. So there's a continuity between the message of John the Baptist and Jesus. Now, for me, Don, it was helpful literally to edit your question and highlight some of the couplets that you had: completion and urgency, arrival and more action, those present involving the history of the Creator, Kairos and Chronos. In case any of our listeners don't already know this, Kairos and Chronos are Greek words. Chronos is tick-tock time. It's time that can be measured. Our word chronology comes from that. Kairos has to do with the quality or the fullness of time. And I don't think we can fully understand the word, but they're both are literally translated as time, but they speak of time with some different, not contradictorily, but with some enhanced understandings. And to your question about Kairos and Chronos, Don, I noted that I think Jesus spoke this message in Chronos at a point in time, but there was a depth and a quality to that moment that was important and prevailed. And the connection with John has to do with John said that message. John now is, am I right? This is after he was arrested, okay? So there's some past tense. John did not get out of prison. We know he was executed. So there's the past and the present in John and in Jesus. And I think that it's helpful to understand that in every moment of tick-tock time, there is kairos, there is meaning and purpose. It also, for me, Don, we'll get to fishers of men later, and I'll reserve some comments till then. But I would say this much. Jesus is saying to these disciples with that imagery, what you're doing right now matters. You're fishermen, okay? You're going to continue to be fishermen, but in a different way. So I see chronos and kairos in that dynamic. And I'll stop there for now, Don.
Well, thank you. How about you, Sarah?
Well, I thought about chronos as something that was used by humanity to mark time. And I thought about the gifts of chronos and the gifts of kairos and the benefits that we gain from both those perspectives about time. The gifts of chronos time might be adherence to a schedule, a calendar, timeliness, impatience, frustration, control, time's up, the hands of time, the hourglass of time, you're running out of time, you're late. So all of those things were parts of my thought pattern as I thought about chronos. And it's also the preparation that goes into a meeting at a specific time. I thought about the gifts of kairos, and kairos for me was an opportune time, a decisive moment from which everything flows. So what were the gifts for kairos? It would be patience and compassion and empathy, because time is not within your boundary, but you're looking at the benefits of it. You're seeing the quality of the conversation. You're hearing maybe the beauty of the music that is metered. So I thought about all of those things, and I wondered, are we wiser to consider the kairos of time instead of the chronos of time? And I think with the kairos of time, your focus changes, and you have this thought about time is a gift rather than a torture system that keeps people from doing what they want. There's no time to do the things I need to do or things I want to do, and that's the chronos way of thinking versus the kairos way of thinking, which would be, this is important enough, I'm going to make time. So it's a different perspective. And it led me down a path that made me ask this question, to which do I calibrate my heart? God's time or human time? The perspective of quality of time or the perspective of measuring time? It brought me back to the old frictional thought between the law and the prophets and the good news that the gospel brings. Is it the law that's important, or is it the person that's important? It's the person for me. So, to what would you call your life's metronome? And a metronome, I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with this, but a metronome is something you use that has a steady beat that you can use to learn a piece of music, and it keeps you on the metered metronome, a metered tick-tock, tick-tock while you learn the piece of music. So what's your life's metronome or soundtrack or beatbox that you would use to measure the lifespan that you have been given? And is timelessness being without the meter of human time? Is the bigness of God's time something that works without the constraints of human time? And I don't know the answers to those questions, but it led me down this idea of what's calibrating the beat of my heart. What set my heart on its motion? Was it God's thought and God's fullness of time, or was it human time? And the perspective thought pattern alone was enough to change the dynamic of my thinking. And it brought a certain sweetness to my preparation. So I'm grateful for that question. Thank you, Don.
Thank you. And Charles Willard, anything to add?
I'm trying to think of how to articulate this. I think one of the realities for most church members today, and for a long time, has been that we, for the most part, don't experience the kind of what I'll call kairotic moment that each of these disciples experienced in hearing this call of Jesus. Most of us grow up with that decision already having been made for us. And we have an opportunity to confirm it. But as I've talked about before in our conversations, that's a strange experience all in its own. And so my thought is that I'm guessing that all of us around this table were in the same group that I am, namely the confirmation, the extension of that invitation happened on our behalf at a point where we had no capacity to make that decision or even understand what was being offered. And it's just a very different world. And I don't know that there's any way for us to go back there or to re-experience that. I've heard occasions, some friends of mine in different contexts have described their confrontation of what would be a call, but that's rare. And so I think that it would be useful for us along the way to think about how most people in the pews actually would have experienced that call and how they can re-experience it if possible, if that's possible, in a kairotic moment. I don't know. It's a puzzle for me.
Thank you. Well, one of the reasons I thought it would be it might be a helpful lead-off question was I've approached this kind of commentary in the past with the catch-all beyond all understanding, the mind of God, the mysteries of God. And yeah, I read it the other day as I was preparing. It was like, that's not what this said. This said this is accessible. It didn't say we fully understand, but it says it's the beginning of a book. It's the meditation on doing and living, and we're supposed to consider both, that there's an arrival and there's more to be done. Things are fulfilled and things need to be done. Your life's involved, but it echoes through time. And It was so I thought, well, maybe I should just turn it into a promise too, that we are to talk about it, but on a very applied basis. After all, this is Mark. What are you doing? Mark, for me, is the book of ING. What are you doing? What is he doing now? What happens next? What happens next? All this plot, all this time, this TikTok that you called it, Bill. This is the TikTok book. So as we go, I just saw a new promise here that says this can be grasped in the most mundane, common things of our lives. Come and see. And Mark says, I'll document this for you as we go through it. I was trying to think of some examples. One might just be, I think some of you are going there, the echo of memory. What is that? Today is January 19th of 2021. It is possible that this will be viewed again way down the road, way down. And I don't know that what we're talking about today is going to echo, but if you look at the TikTok, 119 is one day before inauguration of a new president. And we're in a pandemic. And that the resonance won't be with this day. It'll be that the Bible and other history is filled with pandemics and questions of leadership, that this gets bigger and bigger. And I'm not saying it's all encompassed in time, that we can know the mind of God, but we are being asked to consider all the echoes of history and memory. One example I might give, and what I do for a living, is the arrival and more to be done. And this is a mundane example, but you vest yourself in an enterprise. You're hired by a company. You're hired to do labor. Welcome to the new company. Day one. You have arrived. But you haven't done anything yet. But it does matter that you've arrived. You are a part of a new culture that needs to be understood. Or the day that somebody declares that a company is different or a company goes away. I think there are all these little aspects of living and in this work. It gives us that glimpse. Of course, healing in this book and the other Gospels is always for the future. At least that's the message I get out of it. You've met Jesus, you're healed. What happens now? You follow him, and in many cases, it's like you're going home, going back. You arrived, but now things have changed. You're going to go on about your life. And, of course, this is the book of the mustard seed as well, that we get to think about what we see now and what the promise is of the future. Well, let me use that to get on to the next question. And, Sarah, I'm going to bring this one to you. And it's about following Jesus. I'm going to be careful about how I say this. I mean it to be broad. At the same time, I mean it to be specific to the day we're living in, the TikTok. Following Jesus is being inserted into the public, political, and civic space more intensively right now than I've ever experienced before. And I'm sure some of you listening will go, oh, yeah? Well, let me tell you about my life. But it's pretty intense now. I'm hearing Jesus' name being connected to many causes and crises. And Jesus, without identifying any specific issues or ideologies of the day, is being co-extended with other issues and controversies. Or Jesus is being pasted right now to a lot of causes. And this has gone on, I know, for 2,000 years. But as we read about the disciples making the decision to follow, and their following is physical, they're moving and walking and traveling, is there anything we can learn about following in 2021, especially when things are being cemented to the name of Jesus or Jesus is being pasted to things? What's our Christian obligation in these kinds of circumstances? And I'm raising it not just because it's in my heart, but a lot of friends, people I speak with every day, are raising this question, probably due to the circumstances that we're living in today. What are your thoughts on this, Sarah?
Trepidation is a good word. I shared with my husband this weekend that I'm very cautious now about how I present my faith in public forums, in public settings, because I'm cautious because I'm not sure I can do justice to it. So I guess my thoughts are, as we move forward, it's about following. It's not about carrying a flag or a banner. It's about following. And so the question I have is, are we teachable? And that's the best part, because to be a follower, you're learning, you're in study, you're being mentored, and you have to be willing to learn something new. And I think that's part of the practice of Christianity, the practice of following, is looking for what you don't yet understand, or looking at something in a way to understand it differently. And so that's the first thought I have, is I have to be teachable. I have to be following, not leading. The second thing is I need to be compelled by love alone. Because we were first loved and we were chosen, we have been elected, we have been, if you will, adopted. Our response is to love, not to condemn or judge or find differences and drive wedges. It's about figuring out, how do I better love my neighbor? And my neighbor is everybody that is not me. And I have to be very direct about that. More exciting if they're very, very different from me, because I'm learning a lot of new, which for me is part of the wonderfulness of it all. And in the Followers of the Way phone call yesterday, John shared a bit of, I guess it was a commentary, I think by somebody named Williams, that compared this particular process to like people being in an airport terminal and hearing them call over the terminal speakers, flight 26 leaving for Kansas City is departing from gate 28. If you are holding a ticket on this, please make your way to gate 28. And if I look down and I'm holding the ticket to Kansas City, I know where I'm going, and I turn and I go to gate 28. I'm reacting to that specific call, and that is an interesting thought about how we turn and are listening and are directed by the Spirit. And specifically, I think in some cases, not everybody's going to Kansas City. And other times it may be you're arriving and you're going to the rental car desk to rent a vehicle, or you're going down to meet your family in baggage claim. So it's the position of where we are and where we are in how we're following that determines whether we're going to Kansas City or we're going to baggage claim or we're going to the rental desk. So I thought about that we're not all at the same place at the same time. It's not a collective aha. It's an individual call that we're hearing. So for me, I'm reticent to attach the name of Jesus to a specific movement or a specific action or a specific, I don't know how to phrase it, time and space, because I think we're hearing the call differently with intention. So I think that if we're acting out of love and we're following, we're in a good starting spot. I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, I liked it. Sarah, thank you. Bill Hull, what do you think?
Thank you for the question, Don. A week ago tomorrow, domestic terrorists and insurrectionists attacked our democracy. I was watching it live and I've seen the replay. That much of it was horrifying. As a follower of Jesus Christ, the worst moment for me was the first time among those terrorists I saw several people carrying a banner that said, "Jesus saves." I thought, what is Jesus doing there? Jesus, I don't know a Jesus who advocates the violent overthrow of a government. I don't remember anywhere in the message of Jesus that that's what he said. Now, what it has led me to when I got past, well, I'm not past, but when I began to deal with my anger toward them, was to look at myself and to remember, and I think we've stressed this before on this class, all of us carry within us an image of God. And each of us tend, I think, whether we know it or not, to believe if our image is not the image, at least it is a right way to understand God as revealed in Jesus Christ. And I'm assuming that those terrorists who carried the Jesus Saves signs believed that that's where Jesus was and where Jesus wanted him to be. Doesn't matter how much I disagree with them. I think they were sincere. So I think we all face the challenge of the commandment to have no other gods before the one eternal God, and you shall not make for yourself an idol. You shall not bow down and worship them or worship them. And many contemporary commentators have noted the role of political ideology, that many people across the spectrum politically seem to be locked into their ideology to the expense of being able to be open to other viewpoints and to people who differ with them. And that ideology, that commitment to ideology, can lead us across the spectrum to embrace a leader, no matter what that person's behavior is, because we like their ideology. I think that's a temptation we all face. I was in seminary in the mid-'60s, and the God is Dead movement was prominent then. And I heard some of the lead proponents of that speak publicly. I came across a book. I don't have it now, and I've looked and I can't find it. But a book came out by, I believe, a French author whose name I don't remember. The English title was either exactly or something like Unless God Dies. Well, that caught my attention. The preface written by the English translator was, the title is somewhat misleading. It's a challenge, because what the thesis of the book was, unless I let my image of God die, I cannot begin to meet the living God, and that letting that image die is a lifelong process. Now, in today's world, at my point in life, that sounds sort of obvious. That was a revolutionary thought for me. And I believe that. I believe that I need to deal with my image of what it means to follow Jesus Christ. I am a follower of Jesus Christ. I think I have some understanding. But there's at least, I think by the grace of God, a modicum of humility that I have not yet arrived in really knowing and fully understanding the living God. And I won't in this life, but the journey needs to continue. And I'll leave it there for the moment, Don.
Thank you. Well, I raised the question partly because it's the question of the day for many people that I care about. And I didn't ask it knowing exactly what the answer is, and just trying to acknowledge the struggle in my own heart and of those that I care about. And then here comes Sarah with your answer, and I think you said love alone, which is the meditation I'll take with me today. And I'm trying to work on that it wasn't I'm looking for love, or the pop music that says, where are you looking for love, or I'm looking for love in all the wrong places. It's more about, I think, practicing love. And it helps me, because this comes up so much, that for me it's maybe practicing the word no, not the word yes. And that the discipline for me may be, I'm not going there. No, because I'm busy. I'm busy with, I'm not saying I can answer this honestly, but what is if I said, no, I'm not going there. I'm not going to carry that banner. I'm not going to paste Jesus to the cause because I'm busy with, and I think I'm supposed to say, because my dear friend Sarah said love, I'm supposed to say I'm busy with love. And then that becomes a real challenge in terms of the practice of the love of the day. No, because I'm busy with love. And I was looking through Mark this morning, struggling with this, and thinking about that helped me see it as like a gospel of yellow stickies. I mean, it's using 21st century language that all through that book, people are trying to stick yellow stickies to Jesus, or banners, or posters, or associate him with things. This is nothing new. Matter of fact, all the Gospels are about not just saying, who are you? But many people are saying, how can I participate in this? How can I leverage this? How can I propagandize this? And it helps me understand, even today, why Jesus goes, we're not going to talk about that now. Time's not come. Not going there. Not doing that. Because I'm busy with this ministry. Not going there. No yellow stickies allowed. And I'm looking at it with those new eyes, instead of just seeing, people trying to do the wrong thing with Jesus or hurt Jesus, people trying to appropriate Jesus. That sounds familiar to me. Let's hear from me. What can I do? It's almost you can go up on the roof at night and have a conversation with him. Well, let's talk a little bit about what we might have in common. Let's synthesize what we're talking about. And more than not, Jesus is like, no, I'm busy with, and maybe he's inviting us to be busy with things too. I think it's a challenge that faith doesn't get in the way of anything. And I'll just throw out to wrap up my comments. Just a few pages later, as Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came, and seeing Peter warming himself, she looked at Jesus and said, "You too were with Jesus of Nazareth." And he denied it, saying, "I neither know nor understand what he is talking about." And he went out onto the porch. Hey, Charles, how about you? Anything to add to this section? And you're on mute?
I was on mute, and I said, no, not right now. I was muted.
You're doing great. Thank you. And then let's go to the third question. And, where we're working and struggling with these first two questions, here I thought, well, let's finish up with, here we go again. Once again, let's revisit the metaphor, fishing for people, fishers of men. Do you view it as a tired, overused, diluted, or impactful, or as instructive as you read it and say the words for the 3,000th time? So for those of you hearing it for the first time, we may have listeners that actually are encountering Mark for the first time. There are those out there that might skip over this, or this is one of the most used, and I would say overused, pieces of Scripture. So I thought we'd go back and say, all right, in our life, our journey, where are we with this? And I'll just kick it off by saying what got me going with some fresh thinking was I was looking at some translations, and again, a nod towards Mark Davis. Always appreciate his translations. And I sensed an act of creation. Check it out. I'm speaking for several translators and commentators. That here is a creation story. That we can think about construction, building, come into existence. I will make, I will create, you will become. And there's the metaphor, which is, fishing, and I'm going to use the metaphor, but there's a new creature here. There's something that's being created by getting up on your feet and walking. And that helped me with Chronos and Kairos. Mm-hmm. That helped me what banners are, the yellow sticky Jesus. That as it wasn't me, I'm just looking at the translators. They're saying, I will make fisher. I will make you one that fishes for people. Creation, becoming. Bill Hull, what do you think? I know you've read it at least 3,000 times.
Yes. Don, as a bridge to answer your question, I'm going to commend Sarah. She really stimulated my thinking with her question, what is your life's metronome? I am the husband of a very gifted pianist who started playing at a very young age. I guarantee you, throughout the 56 years of our marriage, there has always been a metronome in our lives. And I'll build a bridge this way. Why does Sybil so carefully use a metronome? A metronome is literally tick, tock, okay, and you can change the pace. So that when she was accompanying the choir, she would be on the same pace that the director wanted her to be. Why? Why pay attention to chronos? Because of the kairos of music, the quality of what she was doing. Those are not contradictory, they blend. Now, to your question, Don, I believe that Jesus is offering a chronos and kairos invitation to the disciples. I've already noted they're already fishermen. He, just on a simple level, he speaks their language. I want you to do something new and different, but it's similar. You mechanically fish. That wasn't what Jesus, to me, it's clear this is not a mechanical image. When we look at the person and style of Jesus, he never reeled people in or hooked them or netted them. He invited. So it's similar and yet different. And I think that's often the case, that you begin with your understanding of your vocation as a fisherman. I'm inviting you to another different, deeper understanding of that. So that's a part of what it means to me. And then just to highlight that, to inject a little bit of humor, I'm going to read a portion of the Message translation by Eugene Peterson. Passing along the beach of Lake Galilee, Jesus saw Simon and his brother Andrew net fishing. Fishing was their regular work. Jesus said to them, "Come with me. I will make a new kind of fisherman out of you. I'll show you how to catch men and women instead of perch and bass." I just found that a little humorous. I think Peterson picks up on what I'm saying is I'm going to teach you a new way of working with people. And that would be one point, that this is about people, not about things, and not about snagging people. Now, it seems to me that this image suggests that we are to seek to influence people's thoughts, feelings, and decisions. The gospel is not about saying what you already are, what you're already doing, what you already do, believe is fine, let's leave it there. Now, it's not about demanding or controlling, but the gospel is inviting us into a new view of ourselves and of others. And so fishing for people, to me, at least in part, means I'm asking you to go out there and approach people, know who they are, be with them where they are, but invite them to a new place. As I've often put it, God meets us where we are. God never leaves us where we are. God meets us as we are. God never leaves us as we are if we, in fact, follow. Those are my thoughts of the moment, Don.
Thank you. How about you, Sarah?
Well, I will say that here's the best part of the story for me. God called fishermen and tax collectors. We don't really have a bead, and Kenny Hubble talked about this yesterday in the Followers of the Way podcast. We don't really have a definition of the kinds of vocations each of the disciples had. We don't know about that. But what we do know is God started with, let's say, in the building of his quote-unquote dream team, as Kenny said, God picked fishermen and tax collectors. Ordinary, normal, kind of average people. Not the brilliant, studied scholars, not the academic elite, not the financial wizards, not the brilliant tactician or statistician. God picked fishermen and tax collectors. There's room in the boat. That's the first thought I had was, oh, there might be room in the boat for me. So with that thought, the idea of shifting my thinking about, is following accessible? Is the teaching of Jesus something that's within reach for everyone? And I think that was the illuminator. So that's the first thought. The second thought is Jesus being a rabbi, and Kenny talked about this as well, that rabbis would select the people they wanted to study, that they would want to bring into the conversation as a student. The rabbi, it would be a privilege or an honor to be selected by the rabbi to become a student of the rabbi. Am I right, gentlemen who are well studied in this particular process? I don't have a good beat on this, but my thought is the fishermen were probably not on the first line of selection for any rabbi. And for a fisherman to get that, okay, you can come with me, you can be a student, was an art of selecting, if you will, the last kid on the baseball field first. So there's some hope in that as well. That for me, it had to do with Jesus isn't looking for the outstanding character. Jesus is looking for the unmeasured character. So it might have been an honor to follow Jesus. It might have been a privilege. You know, we can see it from this side of, if you will, the kairotic moment. We can see it from this side, realizing, wouldn't we all have given anything to be the one that got picked to follow Jesus? I mean, wouldn't it have been a privilege for 3.5 years to follow with him, to hear what he had to say, to think the thoughts that he's thinking, to be involved into that conversation, to be invited into the moment? It's probably likely because of where Jesus was working and speaking and acting as a rabbi that he would have been known. So being selected by Jesus as a follower would have been a privilege, which helped me with the final of immediately leaving, because I would feel that tug of, I can't really leave my dad in the boat with the hired help and mending the nets. It's probably 10 o'clock in the morning and there's like a whole day's worth of work I'm going to be shirking. And that my brain would be thinking it that way. And yet, here's the honor being called from the beach. Come follow me. And I almost see these words because they're not words that my brain can wrap around. Fishers of men. I almost see this as Jesus shaking his head going, I'm going to teach you how to fish a different way. And that's the important thing, I think, for us, is are we teachable? Do we see it as a privilege? Or do we see it as a distraction from what we should be doing? Do we see it as a nuisance that distracts us from the art that we are pursuing ourselves? And I went back to would I have taken that call? Would I have been the one that climbed out of the boat? Would I have been the one that would see the fine gift that this was? And I don't know. But there's room in the boat to follow. So I took great heart in that. I think this is a good moment to ponder and spend a lot of time pondering. And I don't know that it's a pondering that stops. I think it's a pondering that continues. So if you're going to start down a path of learning how to do something, chances are you're not ever going to master it. You will never get the gold star that says you are done. There's going to be the constant wash, rinse, repeat, and I think there's something beautiful in that.
Thank you, Sarah. How about you, Charles Willard? Anything else?
I've been stuck with the thinking about fishers of men and thinking about what what the disciples who were called to that point actually did with the fish. I mean, the analogy is kind of doesn't work, and I've been trying to get around that, not successfully so far. I understand how, as the analogy played out, it changed it so that they weren't really, putting him up on hooks and taking him around and selling them to people, and he wasn't. That wasn't it. But how the disciples, as they were called and responded, were able to make that transition. I can't imagine that in the moment they weren't thinking to themselves, well, he really doesn't mean what we do to fish. He means something else, and what could that be? And that didn't happen. They simply responded right away. And I also had two other thoughts about Jesus' invitation and the request. There are instances in the Gospels where people have said, will return to Jesus, having been healed, and said, I'd like to follow you. And Jesus said, no, your job is someplace else. Go back home and tell people what you have seen and heard. There have been people who, the rich young ruler, for example, when he said, what do I need to do? And Jesus said, well, for you, this is what's required. And, come and follow me. And the rich young ruler, he was the one who went away disappointed because he had great wealth. He was not able to make that cut as these new disciples were. The third person I'm thinking about is Nicodemus, who came to see Jesus at night because he wanted to find out something, but he didn't at that point become a disciple. As far as I know, he went back home. However, he was there at the end. He was there when Jesus was taken for burial, and he interceded. So it's a mixed bag, and I just the fishers of men. What I got stuck on is the first part of the analogy, not the second part of the analogy, and I haven't been able to get myself out of that rut yet.
Thank you, Charles. And we're just about out of time, and I really appreciate the conversation. I'm fascinated now after listening to your answers to these questions, the reminder that everybody in these stories is busy doing something. The men that were recruited here or asked to be fishers of men, you could probably, if you'd spent just a few minutes with them, see that they have a very complex ecosystem with family and business, and they have things to do. They're not sitting there waiting for life to come to them or go by. There's a lot to consider. They're busy, and they say yes because, and that's where the real question comes in for the pathway of the gospel. And for those listening in, Palmacia Presbyterian Church is at 3501 West San Jose Street. That's in Tampa, Florida. And for more information, you can go to palmacia.org. That's PALMACEIA.org. And if you're listening around the time of this podcast, that means we're in a time of pandemic and isolation in many cases. And we commend that site to you for other discussions of the Gospel Lectionary, outstanding music, sermons, discussions, prayers, and reflections. So check that out. And we have an email account as well. We always look forward to hearing your comments. We're at lectionarycallin@palmacia.org, lectionarycallin@palmacia.org. And you're always welcome, and we'll see you next time.